I'm Helen, 29 female. I live alone in a condo that I worked 2 jobs to afford, a quiet little sanctuary in a bustling city that I've carefully curated to be my personal heaven. As a senior marketing manager, my days are chaotic and demanding, so my home is the one place where I can decompress and be myself. This story is about how my sanctuary was violated by the very people who were supposed to protect me, and how a small, blinking security camera gave me the power to reclaim my peace. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The whole thing started, as most family disasters do, with a seemingly innocent phone call from my mother, Margaret. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was juggling a late-night project deadline, a lukewarm cup of coffee, and the overwhelming desire to just crawl into bed. My phone buzzed, displaying her picture. I almost let it go to voicemail, but a familiar pang of guilt made me swipe to answer. "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice already laced with exhaustion. "Helen, sweetie, how are you? Working late again, I bet," she began, her tone a little too cheerful, a little too saccharine. This was her "I'm about to ask for a favor" voice. I'd known it my entire life. "You know it," I replied, tapping away at my keyboard. "What's up?" "Well, you know your sister Chloe's 22nd birthday is coming up this Saturday," she started, drawing out the sentence. I braced myself. Chloe's birthdays were always an event, usually funded one way or another by me or our father before he passed away. Since his passing, the financial and emotional burden had subtly shifted entirely onto my shoulders. "I remember," I said carefully. "I already sent her the gift card to that boutique she loves." "Oh, that's so sweet of you, honey. She'll love that. But you see, we have a little situation," Margaret said. "The restaurant we were going to have a small family dinner at had a plumbing issue. They had to cancel on us. It's impossible to get another reservation for 20 people on such short notice." 20 people. The small family dinner had already ballooned to include Chloe's ever-expanding circle of friends. I sighed, rubbing my temples. "That's a shame, Mom. What's the plan now?" "Well, that's what I was calling about." Her voice brightened, hitting the pitch that signaled the big ask. "Chloe was just devastated. And I was thinking, you have that beautiful condo with the open-concept living room. It would be the perfect place to host a little get-together for her. Just a few hours, cake and some snacks, it would save her birthday." I stopped typing. The idea of 20 people, most of whom were Chloe's rowdy friends, crammed into my meticulously clean and organized space was a nightmare. My cream-colored sofa, the gallery wall I'd spent months planning, my collection of fragile ceramic vases, it was a recipe for disaster. More importantly, I wasn't even going to be in town. "Mom, I can't," I said, trying to be firm but gentle. "I have that marketing conference in Chicago, remember? I leave Friday morning and won't be back until late Sunday night, the one I've been talking about for months." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Oh, that's this weekend? Are you sure?" she asked, a hint of accusation in her tone, as if I'd invented a business trip just to spite my sister. "Yes, Mom, I'm sure. The flight is booked, the hotel is paid for, I'm giving a presentation. I can't just not go." "Well, you wouldn't have to be there," she said, her voice regaining its persuasive momentum. "You could just leave me a key. I would be there the whole time to supervise. I'll make sure everything is looked after. It would mean the world to Chloe. She's had such a tough year." Chloe's tough year consisted of quitting 2 part-time jobs because she didn't like the hours and spending most of her time trying to become a social media influencer. A venture that seemed to involve taking selfies in trendy cafes and complaining about her lack of funds. My tough year had involved leading a multi-million-dollar campaign for my company and grieving the first anniversary of my dad's death. But my struggles rarely seemed to register on the family radar. "The answer is no, Mom," I said, my patience wearing thin. "It's my home, not a party venue. I'm not comfortable with a party happening there when I'm not home. We can all celebrate with Chloe when I get back." The line went quiet for a moment, and then the emotional manipulation began. "I just can't believe you're being so selfish, Helen. After everything I do for you girls. Your sister is heartbroken, and you're worried about your precious throw pillows. What would your father say if he heard you being so cold-hearted?" The mention of my dad was a low blow, and she knew it. It was her trump card, the one she pulled out whenever she wasn't getting her way. My resolve wavered, but the thought of the inevitable chaos and disrespect for my space won out. My home was my boundary, the one thing in my life that was truly mine. "My father would say that it's my home and my decision," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I'm sorry, Mom, but it's not happening. The answer is final. I have to go, this project won't finish itself." I hung up before she could reply, my heart pounding with a mixture of anger and guilt. The rest of the week was tense. I received a series of short, passive-aggressive texts from Chloe, things like, "Must be nice to have a fancy apartment you don't have to share, and guess we'll just cancel my birthday then." My mother gave me the silent treatment. I tried to push it out of my mind, focusing instead on my presentation. I packed my bags on Thursday night, triple-checking my locks and feeling a sense of unease I couldn't quite shake. Before leaving for the airport on Friday morning, I got one last text from my mom. "Don't worry about the key. I still have the spare you gave me for emergencies. Have a good trip." My blood ran cold. I had completely forgotten about that key, given to her years ago after I locked myself out. I had a horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. I almost called her back to demand she not use it, but then I thought she wouldn't. She wouldn't go directly against my wishes after I had been so clear. It was just another guilt trip, a final jab to make me feel bad while I was away. My mother, for all her faults, had always respected a hard boundary, or so I thought. Convincing myself I was being paranoid, I grabbed my suitcase and headed for the airport, pushing the nagging worry to the back of my mind. It was a mistake that would end up costing me far more than just a clean apartment. The conference in Chicago was a whirlwind of success. My presentation was met with applause and praise from my superiors, and I managed to network with several important figures in my industry. For 2.5 days, I was fully immersed in my professional life, the petty family drama a distant hum in the background. I felt accomplished, energized, and proud of myself. The feeling, however, was short-lived. It evaporated the moment I stepped back into my apartment building late Sunday night. The first sign that something was wrong was the faint, sickly sweet smell of stale beer and cheap perfume lingering in the hallway on my floor. It grew stronger as I approached my door. Number 4, a sense of dread washed over me, cold and heavy. I fumbled with my keys, my hands suddenly trembling. As I pushed the door open, the smell hit me with the force of a physical blow. The scene that greeted me was one of utter devastation. My pristine, quiet sanctuary was gone. In its place was a war zone. The floor was sticky, littered with red plastic cups, crushed snack bags, and confetti. A dark, ugly stain that looked suspiciously like wine was splashed across my beautiful cream-colored rug. One of my favorite ceramic vases lay in pieces by the leg of the sofa, its delicate fragments scattered like broken teeth. The gallery wall I had so lovingly arranged was askew. 2 frames were knocked crooked, and one was missing entirely, leaving a naked hook on the wall. I dropped my suitcase with a thud, my mind struggling to process the violation. I walked numbly through the living room and into the kitchen. The sink was overflowing with dirty dishes, glasses smeared with lipstick, and plates caked with dried frosting. The marble countertop, usually spotless, was sticky with spilled drinks, and a half-eaten, mutilated birthday cake sat in its box, looking pathetic and grotesque. A trail of muddy footprints led from the kitchen back, toward the living room, and then down the hall to my bedroom. My heart hammered against my ribs. My bedroom was my most private space, a place I had explicitly told my mother was off-limits to any guests, back when I used to host quiet family dinners. I pushed the door open, and a small gasp escaped my lips. My bed, usually made with military precision, was a rumpled mess. The duvet was on the floor, and several of my decorative pillows were strewn about. My closet door was ajar, and clothes I hadn't worn were pulled from their hangers and tossed onto a chair. But the worst part was my vanity table. It was my favorite corner of the apartment, where I kept my perfumes and my small, curated collection of jewelry. Most of it was costume jewelry, but there were a few special pieces I treasured. A pair of diamond earrings my father had given me for my college graduation, and a delicate gold and sapphire necklace that had belonged to my grandmother. My jewelry box was open, its contents in disarray. I frantically began to sift through the tangled chains and single earrings, my panic rising. The costume jewelry was all there, but the small velvet box that held my faith. Ours diamond earrings was empty. The necklace from my grandmother was gone. A wave of nausea and rage washed over me. They hadn't just had a party. They had ransacked my home. They had gone into my private spaces, treated my belongings with utter contempt, and stolen items that were not just valuable, but deeply sentimental and irreplaceable. The hurt was so sharp, so profound, it felt like a physical wound. My mother had not only ignored my explicit, no, she had facilitated this invasion. She had stood by while my home was destroyed, and my most precious possessions were taken. I pulled out my phone, my fingers shaking so badly I could barely unlock it. I called my mother. It went straight to voicemail. I called Chloe. Same result. A cold, hard certainty began to form in my chest. They were avoiding me. They knew what they had done, and they were hiding. I spent the next hour in a daze, mechanically moving through the apartment, picking up trash and putting it into bags. Every broken object, every sticky spill, felt like a personal insult. The disrespect was staggering. This wasn't just the aftermath of a thoughtless party, it was a deliberate act of contempt. It was a message. My boundaries didn't matter, my home didn't matter, and my feelings didn't matter. All that mattered was what Chloe wanted. As I was wiping down a sticky patch on the hardwood floor, my rage began to cool, replaced by an icy resolve. The initial shock and hurt were solidifying into something else, something harder and more focused. They thought they could do this and face no consequences. They thought I would just clean up their mess, swallow my anger, and let it go, just as I had countless times before. But this time was different. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. They had taken something from me that wasn't just jewelry, they had taken my sense of security in my own home. And I was going to make sure they understood the gravity of what they had done. I just didn't know how. The missing necklace and earrings were my word against theirs, and I knew how my mother would spin it. She would claim I had misplaced them, that I was being hysterical and ungrateful. I needed more than just a trashed apartment. I needed proof. The next morning, I woke up on the sofa. Having given up on cleaning around 3 a.m., the apartment was still a disaster, but the initial chaos had been contained to several large trash bags. Every muscle in my body ached, not just from the physical labor, but from the deep, soul-crushing exhaustion of betrayal. I made a cup of coffee and sat on my balcony, trying to figure out my next move. Filing a police report felt like a nuclear option, one that would irrevocably shatter my family. But what other choice did I have? They had stolen from me. As I was staring blankly at the street below, I saw my next-door neighbor, Arthur Morales, watering the plants on his own balcony. Mr. Morales was a retired police detective, a quiet but observant man who had lived in the building for over 20 years. We always exchanged pleasantries in the hallway. He was sharp, and I had a feeling he didn't miss much. He noticed me and gave a small nod. "Morning, Helen. Looks like you had a wild weekend." I flinched, embarrassment and anger warring within me. "It wasn't me," I said, my voice hoarse. "I was out of town. It was my family. They used my apartment for a party without my permission." Mr. Morales's friendly expression hardened slightly. He put down his watering can and looked at me intently. "I thought that was strange. Didn't seem like your style. It was quite the scene on Saturday night. Music was rattling my windows until well after 2 a.m. I almost called security, but I figured you'd given them the okay." "I didn't," I confirmed, a lump forming in my throat. "And they did more than just make a mess. They stole some things from me, jewelry, things that are irreplaceable." He was silent for a moment, his detective instincts clearly kicking in. He surveyed my face, his gaze analytical. "Did you see who came and went?" he asked. I shook my head. I wasn't here. It's just my word against theirs. My mother will say I'm making it up. Mr. Morales leaned against his railing, crossing his arms. Well, it might not have to be, he said slowly. You know that new doorbell camera I installed a few months ago? The one with the motion sensor. My head snapped up. I had noticed his new gadget but hadn't given it much thought. Yes. It has a pretty wide field of view. It captures my entire doorway, but it also gets a clear shot of your door and a good portion of the hallway between us. It records whenever there's motion. I got it after a few packages went missing on our floor. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. I'd be willing to bet it recorded everyone who entered and left your apartment on Saturday. A jolt of adrenaline shot through me, the first spark of hope I'd felt in over 12 hours. Mr. Morales, could I see the footage? Arthur, please, he corrected gently. And of course, why don't you come over? I'll pull it up on my laptop. Let's see what we can find. 5 minutes later, I was sitting in Arthur's neat, orderly living room, a stark contrast to the chaos in my own. He had his laptop open on the coffee table, the security app already running. He scrolled back to Saturday. The first arrivals were around 7 p.m., he narrated, pointing at the screen. There's your mother, Margaret, letting in your sister. I watched as the time-stamped clips played out. The screen showed my mother, smiling, opening my door with her key. Chloe bounced in behind her, already on her phone. Then, for the next hour, a steady stream of young people, none of whom I recognized, arrived at my door, carrying bags of chips and cases of beer. My stomach churned as I watched them treat the entrance to my home like the doorway to a frat house. Arthur fast-forwarded through several hours of footage, showing people coming and going, smoking in the hallway, and leaving empty cups on the floor. The sheer number of guests was far more than the 20 my mother had mentioned. It looked closer to 50. Okay, let's get to the end of the night, Arthur said, his voice low and serious. The party seems to wind down around 2:30 a.m. He found the clip. It showed the last of the guests stumbling out. Then my mother appeared, trying to usher a very drunk Chloe out the door. Chloe was arguing with her, laughing and waving her hands dismissively. She stumbled back inside my apartment, out of the camera's view. My mother followed, looking exasperated. They were inside for another 10 minutes. My heart began to pound. This was it. The next clip was timestamped at 2:47 a.m. The door opened again. My mother walked out first, looking tired and annoyed. Then Chloe emerged behind her. She was no longer laughing. Her face was set in a strange, determined expression. As she stepped into the hallway, she clutched her small crossbody purse tightly to her chest with one hand. With the other, she reached into the pocket of her jeans. I leaned closer to the screen, my breath catching in my throat. For a split second, her hand was in clear view of the camera, illuminated by the hallway light. She was holding something small and metallic. It was my grandmother's sapphire necklace. I could see the distinct dark blue stone and the delicate gold chain. Then, just as quickly, she shoved it deep into her purse, glanced guiltily up and down the empty hallway, and followed my mother toward the elevator. The camera also caught a glint from her ears. She was wearing my father's diamond studs. The air left my lungs in a rush. It was undeniable. It wasn't some random party guest who had opportunistically stolen my things. It was my own sister. And my mother was right there, an accomplice, whether she knew it or not. There, I whispered, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. That's it, that's my necklace. Arthur rewound the clip and zoomed in, pausing the frame at the exact moment the necklace was visible. The image was grainy, but it was clear enough. There was no mistaking it. Well, Helen, he said, his voice grim, it looks like you have your proof. He looked from the screen to my face, his expression softening with sympathy. I can download these clips and email them to you right away. That's theft, plain and simple. I stared at the frozen image of my sister, a thief in the night, her face a mask of casual betrayal. The hurt I felt was deeper than I could have imagined. This wasn't just about a trashed apartment anymore. This was a profound, calculated act of deceit by the person who was supposed to be my closest ally. The ice in my veins began to burn. The question was no longer what I should do. The question was how. Armed with the video evidence, I felt a seismic shift inside me. The grief and helplessness that had been drowning me for the past day were replaced by a cold, razor-sharp clarity. I thanked Arthur profusely, his calm demeanor and concrete help feeling like a lifeline. He emailed me the video files immediately, and I saved them in multiple locations: my laptop, my phone, and a cloud drive. As I walked back into my own apartment, the lingering mess no longer seemed like a symbol of my violation, but rather the scene of a crime I now had every intention of prosecuting, in one way or another. My first instinct was to call the police. Arthur, with his detective background, had made it clear that this was a criminal matter. But I hesitated. Involving law enforcement would create a permanent, public schism in my family. It would be a messy, drawn-out process that would likely cause more pain and drama than I was prepared to handle. More importantly, it wouldn't give me the one thing I truly craved: accountability. A legal process would be impersonal. I needed them, my mother and my sister, to look me in the eye and confront what they had done. I decided to build my own case first. I spent the rest of Monday meticulously documenting everything. I took hundreds of photos of the apartment from every conceivable angle, capturing the wine stains, the broken vase, the overflowing trash, and the damage to my walls. I created a detailed spreadsheet, itemizing every broken or damaged object and researching its replacement cost. The broken vase was $150. The professional cleaning for the rug would be $200. Repainting the scuffed walls, replacing the missing picture frame, it all added up. The total for the property damage alone was climbing close to $1,000. Then, I focused on the stolen jewelry. I scoured my old photo albums and social media profiles, looking for pictures where I was wearing the pieces. I found a clear photo from my college graduation, my dad beaming beside me, the diamond studs glittering in my ears. I found another from a family holiday dinner a few years ago, the sapphire necklace resting against my collarbone. These photos weren't just proof of ownership, they were painful reminders of the love and memories attached to those items. My father, who had worked so hard to give me those earrings, was gone. My grandmother, whose necklace represented a connection to my heritage, was also gone. Chloe hadn't just stolen gold and stones, she had stolen pieces of my history. My next step was to probe for information without revealing what I knew. I needed to understand the narrative my mother and sister were constructing to absolve themselves of guilt. I sent a simple text to the family group chat, which included my mother, Chloe, and me. I'm back from my trip. My apartment is completely destroyed, and some of my valuable jewelry is missing. It took less than 5 minutes for my mother to call. Her voice was a masterclass in feigned shock and concern. "Oh, Helen, honey, what are you talking about? What's wrong?" "My apartment is a disaster, Mom," I said, keeping my voice flat and devoid of emotion. There was clearly a massive party here, and my grandmother's necklace and the earrings from Dad are gone. "A disaster? Helen, that's such an exaggeration," she scoffed, immediately shifting to defense. "Chloe and I cleaned up before we left. There might have been a few cups left in the sink, but we did our best. As for your jewelry, you must have misplaced it. You know how you get when you're stressed." The gaslighting was so immediate, so predictable, it was almost impressive. She was following the script I had already written for her in my head. 50 people, a broken vase, and a wine-stained rug isn't a few cups, Mom, and I didn't misplace my jewelry. It was in its box before I left, and it was gone when I got back, I stated calmly. "Well, I'm sure one of Chloe's friends must have gotten a bit rowdy," she conceded, trying to redirect the blame to a faceless third party. "But stealing? Helen, that's a very serious accusation. These are good kids. I'm sure there's a simple explanation." Then, Chloe sent a text to the group chat, a performance of pure indignation. "I can't believe you're accusing my friends. We were so careful with your apartment. We even took our shoes off. You're just trying to ruin my birthday. You were probably just careless and lost your own stuff." The coordinated denial was infuriating, but it was also exactly what I needed. They were digging their hole deeper, creating a version of events that was so flagrantly false it would make their eventual exposure all the more satisfying. They were casting me as the hysterical, ungrateful villain, and themselves as the innocent victims of my unjust rage. I spent the rest of the day gathering the final pieces of my plan. I contacted a professional cleaning service and got a formal quote for the damage to the rug and the deep clean the apartment required. I went to a jeweler and got a certified appraisal for the replacement value of the stolen items, using the detailed photos I had. The earrings were valued at $1,500 and the vintage necklace at over $2,000. The total financial cost of their little party was now over $4,500. But it was never just about the money. It was about the complete and utter lack of respect, the bold-faced lies, and the theft of my most cherished memories. As I sat at my clean kitchen table that evening, the apartment now silent and orderly thanks to my own hard work, I laid out my evidence. The video clips, the photos of the damage, the cost estimates, the jewelry appraisals, and the screenshots of their lying texts. It was a comprehensive file detailing their betrayal. They thought they were in control of the narrative, but they had no idea that I had a secret weapon, the unblinking, impartial eye of a neighbor's camera. And I was about to turn that camera's truth into a spotlight they couldn't escape. With my case built, the question became one of venue. A quiet, private confrontation would be too easy for them to dismiss. They would scream, cry, deny, and turn it back on me. My mother was an expert at manipulating intimate settings, using her maternal authority to make me feel small and unreasonable. No, this couldn't be a private affair. It needed an audience, not a legal one, but a social one. It needed to happen in a forum where their carefully constructed public images would be on the line. The perfect opportunity presented itself in my email inbox the next day. It was an invitation from my aunt, my mother's sister, for a big family dinner the following Sunday. It was a joint celebration, my uncle's 60th birthday and my cousin's recent engagement. The entire extended family would be there, aunts, uncles, cousins, and my grandmother, my mother's own mother. This was it. This was the stage. My mother and Chloe cared deeply about their reputation within the family. They portrayed themselves as the perfect, supportive mother-daughter duo, and me as the distant, career-obsessed daughter who was never quite involved enough. This dinner was my chance to correct the record. I spent the next few days meticulously preparing. My plan wasn't just to expose them, it was to demand restitution in a way they couldn't refuse without revealing their true characters to everyone we held dear. I drafted a formal letter. It was addressed to both my mother and my sister. It began by stating the facts, calmly and chronologically. My explicit refusal to host the party, their decision to use my home anyway, the state of the apartment upon my return, and the theft of my jewelry. Then came the evidence. I wrote, "While you have both denied the extent of the damage and any knowledge of the theft, I have irrefutable proof to the contrary." I didn't describe the video. I wanted the reveal to be a surprise. I simply attached a detailed, itemized invoice to the letter. Invoice for unauthorized event at 4B. Professional deep cleaning services, $350. Rug restoration and stain removal, $200. Repair and repainting of damaged wall, $250. Replacement of broken vase and picture frame, $200. Subtotal for damages, $1,000. Replacement value of stolen diamond earrings, $1,500. Replacement value of stolen vintage sapphire necklace, $2,200. Subtotal for stolen property, $3,700. Total due, $4,700. At the bottom of the letter, I laid out my terms. "You have two options," I wrote. Option A, you will return my stolen property to me in its original condition within 48 hours. You will also jointly pay the $1,000 for the damages you caused. If you choose this option, I will consider the matter closed, though our personal relationship will require significant reassessment. Option B, if my property is not returned and the damages are not paid, I will proceed with filing a formal police report for breaking and entering, property damage, and grand larceny, using the evidence I have collected. The choice is yours. I printed 2 copies of the letter and the invoice and sealed them in separate envelopes, one labeled Margaret and one labeled Chloe. Then, I prepared the main event. I loaded the video clips from Arthur onto a USB drive. I knew my uncle had a large, smart TV in his living room where the family always gathered after dinner to look at photos. It was the perfect screen for my premiere. Throughout the week, I maintained complete radio silence with my mother and sister. They sent a few texts, cautiously asking if I was still mad or if I had found my jewelry yet. I ignored every single one. My silence seemed to make them nervous. They wanted a fight, a screaming match they could win by wearing me down. I was offering them a cold, calculated reckoning instead. When Sunday arrived, I dressed carefully. I didn't want to look like a victim. I chose a sharp, professional blazer and tailored pants. I wanted to look like someone who was in complete control of the situation, because I was. I felt a strange sense of calm as I drove to my aunt's house. I wasn't nervous, I was resolved. This wasn't about revenge in the heat of the moment. This was about justice. It was about holding a mirror up to their actions and forcing them to look at their own reflection, with the entire family watching. I walked into my aunt's house, the envelopes tucked securely in my purse and the USB drive in my pocket. My mother and Chloe were already there, laughing with my cousins. When they saw me, their smiles faltered for a fraction of a second. "Helen, you came," my mother said, rushing over to give me a hug I did not return. "We were so worried when you didn't answer our texts." "I've been busy," I said, my voice cool and even. I greeted my other relatives, making a point to have a long, warm conversation with my grandmother. Chloe watched me from across the room, a wary look in her eyes. She knew something was off. The Helen who normally avoided confrontation. The one who always let things go to keep the peace was gone. In her place was someone she didn't recognize. The appetizer course of my plan was complete. The main course would be served after dessert. Dinner was a tense affair, at least for me. My mother and Chloe kept trying to engage me in trivial conversation, a clear attempt to pretend that everything was normal. I remained polite but distant, giving one-word answers and focusing my attention on my other relatives. I could feel their unease growing with every minute of my detached calm. They had expected me to either make a scene or come crawling back, ready to forgive and forget. This quiet, controlled version of me was something they didn't know how to handle. After the birthday cake for my uncle was served and the engagement was toasted, everyone migrated to the living room. As predicted, my uncle turned on the large, smart TV. "Let's pull up some of those old photos from the last family vacation," he announced cheerfully. This was my moment. As he fumbled with the remote, I stood up. "Actually, Uncle David," I said, my voice clear and carrying through the room, "before you do that, there's something I need to share with the family. It's a family matter, and since we're all here, I think it's important that everyone is aware of the situation." A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned to me. I saw a flash of panic in my mother's eyes, and Chloe suddenly looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. "As most of you know," I continued, my gaze sweeping across the faces of my aunts, uncles, and cousins, "I was away on a business trip last weekend. While I was gone, my mother, Margaret, and my sister, Chloe, decided to throw a party in my apartment, against my express wishes." My mother immediately jumped in. "Now, Helen, that's not fair. It was a small get-together for Chloe's birthday. You're making it sound like something sordid." "Was it a small get-together, Mom?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. I pulled the USB drive from my pocket. "Because I have a short video I'd like to show everyone. It might clear things up." I walked to the TV and plugged the drive into the USB port. My uncle, looking confused but intrigued, handed me the remote. I navigated to the first file. It was a compilation Arthur had helped me create. A time-lapse of the 50-plus guests streaming in and out of my apartment, followed by clips of them loitering and leaving trash in the public hallway. The room was silent, the only sound being the muffled party music from the video. I saw my grandmother's face tighten with disapproval. "As you can see, it was not a small gathering," I said, pausing the video. "When I returned home, my apartment was trashed. My property was damaged, but that's not the worst of it. Several items were also stolen from my bedroom." "Stolen?" my aunt asked, her eyes wide. "Helen, what was taken?" "A pair of diamond earrings my dad gave me," I said, letting the words hang in the air. "And the sapphire necklace that belonged to Grandma Helen, our grandmother." I looked directly at my mother's mother, whose namesake I was. Her expression was one of deep shock and hurt. "We told you, Helen, one of Chloe's friends must have taken them," my mother insisted, her voice rising in desperation. "Chloe is just as much a victim as you are." "Is she, Mom?" I asked. I turned back to the TV. "Let's watch the last clip. This is from 2:47 a.m. after all the guests have left." I pressed play. The room watched in stunned silence as the footage unfolded. It showed my mother leaving the apartment, followed by Chloe. It showed Chloe clutching her purse. And then, in crystal clear, slow-motion detail that Arthur had enhanced, it showed Chloe pulling my grandmother's sapphire necklace from her pocket and shoving it into her bag. The glint of my father's diamond earrings in her ears was unmistakable. A collective gasp went through the room. Chloe went pale, looking as if she was about to be sick. My mother stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. The proof was absolute, undeniable, and public. There was no way to spin this, no way to lie her way out of it. I turned off the TV and faced them, the silence in the room deafening. "So, to be clear," I said, my voice resonating with cold authority, "my sister, Chloe, is a thief. And my mother, Margaret, enabled the entire situation and has been lying to cover for her ever since." I walked over to the coffee table and placed the 2 envelopes on it. "This is an invoice for the damages to my apartment and the replacement value of the items Chloe stole, totaling $4,700. And this is a letter explaining your 2 options. Option A, you return my property and pay for the damages. Option B, I file a police report with this video as Exhibit A. You have 48 hours to decide." I then turned to the rest of my family. "I'm sorry to have brought this into your celebration, but I could not allow this to be swept under the rug. I will not be made to feel crazy or vindictive for protecting myself and my home from members of my own family." Without another word, I picked up my purse and walked out of the house, leaving behind the wreckage of their lies and the stunned silence of our family. The ball was now in their court. The drive home was surreal. My hands were steady on the wheel and my mind was surprisingly clear. I didn't feel triumphant or joyful. I felt empty, but in a clean, quiet way. The emotional storm I had been weathering for a week had finally passed, leaving behind a stark and barren landscape. I had done what I needed to do. The consequences were no longer in my hands. The first call came less than an hour later. It was my aunt, the host of the dinner. Her voice was full of sympathy. "Helen, I am so sorry," she said. "I had no idea. What your mother and Chloe did is unforgivable. Your uncle and I are appalled." She told me that after I left, the room had erupted. My grandmother had confronted my mother, her voice trembling with rage and disappointment, demanding to know how she could have raised a thief. Chloe had burst into tears, not of remorse, but of self-pity, sobbing about how I had ruined her life. My mother, for once, had been speechless, unable to defend the indefensible. Over the next 24 hours, my phone was flooded with messages of support from nearly every relative who had been at the dinner. They were shocked, angry on my behalf, and unified in their condemnation of my mother and sister's actions. It was validating in a way I hadn't expected. For years, I had been subtly cast as the difficult one in the family. In one evening, the truth had reframed the entire family dynamic. The next afternoon, there was a knock on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw my mother and Chloe standing in the hallway. Chloe was holding a small, crumpled paper bag. I opened the door but blocked the entrance with my body. They were not welcome in my home. My mother wouldn't look me in the eye. Her face was puffy and blotched with red. Chloe looked sullen and defeated. "Here," she mumbled, thrusting the bag at me. "It's your stuff." I took the bag and looked inside. The diamond earrings and the sapphire necklace were there. They looked unharmed. "And the money?" I asked, my voice flat. My mother finally looked up, her eyes pleading. "Helen, we don't have $1,000 right now. Your sister doesn't have a job and—" "That is not my problem," I interrupted her. "You were happy to cause the damage. You can be happy to pay for it. You're a real estate agent, Mom. Take it out of your commission. Or Chloe can get a second job. I don't care how you get it. The deadline is tomorrow afternoon. If the money is not transferred to my account by then, I am walking into the nearest police station." Chloe shot me a look of pure hatred. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" she spat. "You love having something over us." "No, Chloe, I don't," I replied, my voice weary. "I hate this. I hate that my sister is a thief. I hate that my mother is a liar. I hate that I had to blow up my own family just to get a shred of respect. But what I hate more is being a doormat. That person is gone. You have until 5 p.m. tomorrow." I closed the door in their faces. The next day, at 4:47 p.m., I received a notification from my bank. A transfer of $1,000 had been deposited into my account. The aftermath was quiet. I did not receive an apology, and I didn't expect one. Their actions were driven by public shame, not private remorse. I blocked both of their numbers. My relationship with my extended family, however, grew stronger. They called to check in, invited me for dinners, and made it clear that I was supported. They saw me now, not as the cold, distant daughter, but as the one who had finally stood up to years of quiet manipulation. My life became more peaceful than it had been in years. The constant background hum of family obligation and guilt was gone. I spent my weekends hiking, reading, and reconnecting with friends I had neglected. I reclaimed my apartment as my sanctuary, filling it with new things that brought me joy, untainted by bad memories. I even developed a warm friendship with my neighbor, Arthur. We would have coffee on our balconies sometimes, talking about everything and nothing. He never once mentioned the incident again, but his quiet, steady presence was a comfort. A few months later, my aunt told me that Chloe had been forced to get a full-time job at a warehouse to pay our mother back for the money. She was apparently miserable. My mother had lost the respect of her own family, and her social standing, which she valued so highly, was in tatters. They had faced their consequences. It brought me no pleasure, only a sense of grim finality. I learned a hard lesson through all of this. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who are least capable of respecting you. And sometimes, keeping the peace comes at too high a cost, your own. By setting one, final, unbreakable boundary, I hadn't destroyed my family. I had simply stepped away from the toxic parts of it, allowing myself the space to heal and build a new foundation, not on obligation or guilt, but on genuine peace and self-respect. And in the quiet of my own home, that felt like the greatest victory of all.